But the four stages are survival, status, freedom, and purpose. And when he went through them, and I'm talking like a 270-page manual book that he prints out, gives to every single person, you're taking notes through the whole thing. When he went through that section, like I could see at that moment when he went through it in 2024 this year, where exactly I was. And when he went through each one of those stages, I can remember going through each stage. It was very, very vivid. Welcome back. We got James and Angela here, and different scene if you're watching on YouTube, as we're about to embark on our 7th move in 13 years of marriage.
Yep.
Exciting. Headed down to the wonderful state of Florida. That's all we're going to tell you so you don't creep on us while we're down there. But today we wanted to talk about a really important topic. I've been to the Patrick but David conference the last 2 years in a row. The first year was really eye-opening, incredible conference. And for all of those people that are like, oh, these conferences, people go to, business conferences, they're all rah, 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 and this and that, the other thing. Well, this is much different. It's actually none of that. There's no hype. There's loud music, of course, but there's no Tony Robbins, or there's nothing like that. Motivational.
Motivational, maybe
Right.
is the right word.
It's all business strategy. It's all working with your spouse, working with your partner. It's all strategic planning, thinking, and execution. It has nothing to do with motivation. It's actually demotivating when you realize how little you're doing right and what you should be doing. And so the conference in 2023 was fantastic. Then we went again in 2024. We brought a couple other people. That's kind of my goal every year, is to bring someone else, bring a couple people with us, especially as our team grows. And so again, this was just another swift kick in the pants. But this year, signed up again and just felt really motivated to talk with Angela about coming to the conference. And one of the biggest things, and we're going to talk about it today, is Patrick but David talked about the 4 levels or 4 stages of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And the 4 stages, and this is going to be 4 episodes. We're going to talk about each stage, and hopefully in depth. We'd love to get your feedback and comments, questions, spouses, husbands, whoever. But the 4 stages are survival, status, freedom, and purpose. And when he went through them, and I'm talking like a 270-page manual book that he prints out, gives to every single person, you're taking notes through the whole thing. When he went through that section, like I could see at that moment when he went through it in 2024 this year, where exactly I was. And when he went through each one of those stages, I can remember going through each stage. It was very, very vivid. So today, Angela and I want to talk about the first stage, which is survival, and how that impacts the marriage, the business, and kind of everything, and how to maybe get yourself out of that stage, or at least recognize that you're in it. Because when I was in it,
You didn't know.
I didn't recognize it. Talking about it with you the other day, I think you realized, and then I think we both know where the pivotal changing point was of like, hey, we need to change. So that's what we want to talk about. I'll turn it over to you to maybe lead into maybe some questions that will kind of get us going. Love to hear from your perspective after we talked about like what is survival mode. Now that we're out of survival mode, what that looks like.
Well, I think when you're in it, it's very difficult to see, which is why when you define what it is and realize like, oh, like that's the stage that I'm at, how do I get out of it? What are some key factors that tell me that this is the stage that I'm in? And then as a spouse, what do we do when our spouse is in that survival mode? What does that look like? So those are some of the key things that we really want to go over today. And I do believe it is important to recognize that this is the stage you're in so that you can continue to move through the stages. When he came home from the conference, this was one of the main things that he said was a takeaway for him, and that we really needed to work together to get to the purpose stage, which I'm excited to talk about that one few episodes down the road. But let's talk about survival. So what are some key things now that we are out of that survival stage that you can look back and say, this is how I know I was in survival? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I think when the survival stage is really, it's a level of high stress. I would say it's a stage where you every day wake up as an entrepreneur, high achiever, business owner. You wake up every day, and as soon as you wake up, your stress level just elevates. Like your heart rate just gets going. Like I wear the Aura ring, and this last week we were doing some training, and there were 2 days specifically that my stress was just, it had never been that high before. And there's a couple things specifically that was going on that elevated it. Now, I'm not in the survival stage now, but had I had this ring back then or a watch that was monitoring, I guarantee you for probably 2 months straight, my stress level was in the max. It was just at the max. 0 sleep.
Ring's blowing up.
Yes, the ring is vibrating on my hand, blowing up, like you need to stop. So I think a couple of the key things that I would say that may resonate with people, and you may have a couple as well, just looking from the outside, was when a couple times, like when I started in the financial services industry and I had no leads or I had no clients to meet with. That was survival. That was really high stress. If I'm not meeting with a client, I'm not getting paid. I think about people in the construction industry. If you're not banging nails or giving someone a quote or in someone's home doing remodeling, you are probably in survival stage. You are probably at a high stress level. Thinking, worrying, concerned about where is that next job coming from. That is a very challenging stage to be in because you don't know where the next paycheck is coming from. Now, I would say on the business side, survival is really financially. You are financially trying to survive. You're not a W-2, you don't get an automatic paycheck. And so when we're talking financial or when we're talking survival, you're talking financial, you're talking, is the business going to run? Are you going to have a new client? So, when I was self-employed in the financial industry, I would say it was, I didn't have a pipeline. I didn't have clients that I was meeting with on a regular basis. I didn't have residual income coming in. You had a job, right, as a teacher. So I don't think you really recognized the survival stage because you were having a paycheck come in, right? So,
but I saw you in it. I understood a little bit. I mean, I didn't know that that's what it was, but I saw that.
Constant movement, constant stress, constant checking my phone, checking an email, getting a phone call, right? Here's another thing. This is just bringing up an idea of, if you're in survival mode, you will answer the phone. Doesn't matter what time of day or night or who you're with. You will answer the phone either thinking or hoping it's a client that you maybe prospected. Agree? Disagree?
Absolutely.
Right. So that was in the financial, I think, world. Now spinning over to, brick and mortar crumble, that was different. We knew the financial aspect once we had opened was just going to kind of take care of itself. However, we agreed with our partners at the time that we didn't want to take a lot of money from the business right away, a lot of big salaries. So we were very low. We were paid worse than most of the employees, which is fine. That was our goal. So I don't know if Crumble was really, I think it was some financial because we withheld distributions and pay for for 3 years before we really started to pay ourselves, which was a blessing looking back. I think that was really healthy. However, being in it, survival mode there was just constant work, working 18 hours a day, sometimes from open to close. Constantly, I would say, being in survival mode means you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not healthy. You're only focused on work. You're only focused on trying to make sure and ensure the success of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think probably disorganization. What would be some other things that you'd say, looking at the Crumble startup?
I would say a lot of it was just physical and emotional, as well as financial. There was definitely an aspect there. But what I would say is that typically survival is at the start of a company, right? It's at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, mm-hmm. where you are trying to get something off the ground. So that being said, is there even a way around survival stage, do you think? Yeah,
it looks a lot different. Like even now when we open our 8th Crumble, it's a cake.
Right.
When we open Pickleball.
Starting our journey, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of like you said, there's financial things, there's physical things, but again, is there even a way to
No, I
not
don't think
go
so.
through the
No,
survival
I think
stage?
it's like the stages of grief, right?
Right.
Everyone's going to go through
Right.
that. And I don't know the stages of grief yet, so.
Right. Thank the good Lord.
Yes, thank goodness. But I think there's no way around it. The question is how short will it be and how long will it be? For us, I really think it was
At least a year.
12 to 18 months before we kind of removed from survival mode. And I think it could have been a lot quicker had we had more coaching, had we had more education, had we had, a mentor in that space that was literally, like, I'll tell you what, if I had, like, for example, with financial services, I had Steve, right, coaching me. I can't tell you what I would pay right now to have a mentor walk me through everything I need to do. I think the cost, I would pay $100,000 for 12 months. I would do that. If I had the money, I would pay easy $100,000 for a year of someone to mentor me through the startup and completion of a brick and mortar business. It's worth that much. It's worth 10x that.
Because you'd go through the stages a lot quicker.
So quick.
You'd recognize, somebody would be telling you from the outside, hey, this is what you're doing.
This is how I messed up.
This is where you are. Let's get you to this stage. And then
Correct.
provide a path from A to B.
Yeah.
So going through it, right, we've been through the survival stage, some things that looks like. How would you say you recognized it and got out of it after that 18 months?
I think the first recognition of it was that conversation we had in the back hallway, which if you're not familiar with that conversation, go check out one of the other podcasts. Angela,
Starting Crumble, I think, or beginning.
Angela, I think it was Our Story and Crumble. But go re-listen to that one, and Angela had to smack me around a little bit.
But that was only 3 or 4 months.
That was 3 or 4 months in. So that was where I recognized that there was a problem. The question from there is when you recognize there's finally a problem, whether you call it survival or whatever you call it, the question is how do you remove yourself or get out of that problem? And from there, we started talking to John Gothier, who's a great guy, who gave us some mentoring. We started talking with some other business people, business owners. And so we did get a little bit, but it wasn't this like, I could call them any day, anytime, say, hey, I have this problem. I need you to get me in this store. I need you to get me in this store. It's different, right? You still need to figure a lot of things out on your own. So there's still a ton of that stress. Now add scaling to that, add opening a second and a third and a fourth store within 2 years. If you don't figure out that one location first, well, now you just open a second location and you have double the same problems that you haven't figured out. So I think there's a piece of it there. And by no means am I saying you should try to skip the survival stage. I think the survival stage is very, very important to the growth and the success of your business. And I'm grateful for it now, looking back. Would I want to do it again? No. But would I do it again if I needed to get to where we are today? 100%. Right? I'm not saying that I would like to go do that because it was very painful. Probably the hardest thing I've done to date. But recognizing, I think that was the recognition, and then it was, okay, I need to figure out how to get out of that. Now, knowing what I know today in 2024, November 2024, and going backwards, one of the first things that I would do, this is a really big pro tip for starting my business, is I would immediately hire an assistant. No questions asked. That would be literally the first thing that I would do. And your wife is not your assistant. That you should separate that completely. You should not make your wife, I think, your assistant. You disagree with that? No. Because we tried that, right? I was the general manager, if you will, and you were the assistant. That didn't work so good.
I think it's just people in general. I would say the number one, route that we found out of survival stage was team.
Yeah, the right
members,
people.
The right people in the right positions. Answered not every problem, but answered a lot of the problems that we were having in the survival stages.
Right.
So I would say having the right people, and an assistant might be one of them for you.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, because there's so many little tasks that just eat up your time, the schedules and bills and responding to emails and this and that you can just pass off to someone if you create a system.
But what if a financial survival is where you're at? Like, go back to Primerica.
Right.
You were in financial survival mode. Would you still hire an assistant?
I think it would look a little different, but I think yes. I think it would be part-time. It would be a virtual assistant. It would be somebody that can do things that eat up my time from prospecting.
Sure.
Because if I'm not prospecting or on the phone making calls to get clients, then what am I, right? Then I'm doing paperwork. I'm doing a task that is not producing money. Right? So I think I would do that, and I would figure out a way to make that compensation work appropriately. Again, you got to finagle and you got to do something. Maybe I need to get a part-time day job, morning job, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. just so that I can afford to pay an assistant. You got to do what you got to do. But I think in that aspect, having the right people, I think that's the right answer. So what positions do you need? Now we got Jason on board, then we got other GMs on board. Now we have quite a few people. And now we're at the point where we need to make sure that those people are performing their roles properly, right? So that there's not too much fat at the top, too much payroll going out. That's not, that's just covering and hiding issues and the problems down below. So there's an aspect of that you need to be mindful of. But I think it goes back to the right people. So I think, but figuring out if you are in survival mode, I mean, looking back now, it's kind of easy. Like there's multiple business owners and entrepreneurs that I know right now that I'm thinking of off the top of my head that I know are still in survival mode from a year or 2 years ago. I just know it. Their inbox is just jammed. They've got 100 emails they haven't gotten to. They're still working in stores. They're still doing, recruiting, or they're still doing this or that. And maybe they like to do some of that, but I can just tell by talking with them sometimes that their stress level is high. Their heart rate is high. They're not doing the things that they probably would love to do, taking the vacations that they want with their family. Now they're making a ton of money, so financial isn't really a problem, but that survival mode is they haven't figured out where they're at. Their survival mode is they haven't figured out how to automate the business yet and put the right people. So I think you're right. I think it's the right people in that place. So I want to flip it for a minute and say, what did it look like from your angle as a spouse while I was going through that constant survival mode of, and we've said this before, really making the business kind of the mistress for a while, right? Spending all my time with it, because that's really a sign of survival mode where you have no life besides work. So what did it look like from your position?
I feel like you kind of answered your own question. I felt like, and we talked about this in some other episodes, but I kind of felt like the leftovers, because you would come back, when you did come home, it was, you were exhausted, you were stressed, you were physically, emotionally tired. And then financially too, like when we talked about starting Primerica, that was a financial stress. Mm-hmm. So there was then some stress on me because I was providing some of the income, paycheck, which wasn't that much, right? So there was still that financial burden that I felt almost responsible for while you were kind of trying to figure that out. Mm-hmm. But I would say more so with Crumble, it was feeling like, how is this ever going to work? Because I don't feel like he cares about us. He never spends time with us anymore. Is this worth it? Like,
right.
Yeah, I understood to some degree that there needed to be a sacrifice made, but I didn't understand what the sacrifice would look like. And so I think that's the hard part about the balance with survival mode is I think most people will go through it. If you're starting a business or you're a high achiever, there will be a survival stage and you will be in survival mode. So how would you, because I don't think we did it correctly, but how would you balance like being in survival mode and still having a family when you're done in survival mode?
It's a tough question.
And I think we fell our way through it. Like we failed forward.
Yeah.
I don't think we did it correctly, but now looking back, I'm like trying to think like, how would we have done it different?
Well, so let's talk about it, right? So we're literally going through another startup right now. We're opening the Pickler, which is an indoor pickleball facility. I think some people know if they're following along on social medias and so on. And our first one's going to open probably beginning of January. So maybe when this airs, we'll be close. But we're going through that right now.
Right.
One of the reasons I literally just had that crazy stress last week was we went out to their training, and it's a startup franchise company, and no franchise company has all their ducks in a row right away. And I think they'd be, they would agree with that.
Right.
Agree with me saying that. And so we just found that there's a lot of things missing that we're going to now have to create on our own. But what I love is we were there with 5 people, myself, Jeff, Chase, Josh, and Steve, our club coordinator. So we were there with 5 people. When we went to Crumble, it was 5 people. However, we fired our manager before we opened, and you and I were the ones operating. So really, it was only 3. Jeff was there. He learned a ton. Steve was there as well, but Steve was pretty silent, and Jeff wasn't on the ground as much as we were. He was on the ground a lot, just not as much as we were, right? So I felt like it was more like 3 of us, and really 2. It was you and me. This time around, we're going with 5, and I know that 4 of them are the right people. Not 100% on the 5th person, but I think this person will do well. I think he'll do really, really well. So that's an aspect there of we've already changed the game, right, with this first startup, or from the first startup to the second, of we know we needed more people, the right people in the right places. Now we already have, that was only the people that we brought to the training. We had another 2 that we have hired that we're training on our own that didn't need to go to that training. So we have like triple the people that are in the right seats, we believe, to start this next company up than we did the first one. So we recognized that and changed what we did last time around. So I think that's the aspect of there is going to be this learning survival mode. Financial will not be the concern in this one, right? It will be how quickly can we learn and compress that gap so that we move on to the next stage. Excuse me. And so I think that's really the question. If you feel like you're in that survival mode, if you're a spouse and your wife or your husband is working all the time and they don't have time for you, and you're stressed because they're stressed, and the kids aren't, getting the attention that they need, then there's a conversation that needs to happen, right? And what would that look like? Like, what would you, if we were going through this again, how would you connect with me about that?
I think it's hard. I think that there definitely needs to be approached with grace, right? Because you need to understand that in order to start up this business, there are going to be sacrifices that are made. It's going to be financial, it's going to be physical, it's going to be time away, it's going to be mental. So I think approaching it with grace, but also communicating and saying, hey, what can I do? What can we do? We need to try to figure this out. Here are the pieces that I feel are missing. If it's time, then figuring out little pockets of time that maybe they're not seeing. Or if it's finances, hey, how can we work together to make this work?
If it's not finances, go find a coach.
Yeah.
Go pay somebody to get you out of that stage. Like I think of a couple people right now. I would reach out to Dan Martell. I'd reach out to Patrick David. Like those would be 2 guys that I would connect with like immediately. If money wasn't a challenge and it was really just your time of your startup,
right.
You need to find somebody that can recognize where you are and move you out of it. We're happy to talk with you. If you're going through a stage or something and it's a spouse, reach out to Angela. If it's a dude, whatever, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with people about what that looked like for us, because it was ugly, really ugly. I actually was just talking with someone the other day. Said, hey, I listened to your guys' episode about Crumble. I had no idea you had such marital challenges during that time. I was like, yeah, nobody really knew. I didn't even know until it came up. But we worked through it.
I think communicating is, and we say that on every episode. If you take us with one word, it's communicate. But I think also just understanding that a startup of any sort is going to take you both through a survival status or a survival stage. So how can you partner together to help each other get out of it a little bit quicker?
Yeah, you gotta you gotta work together. You need to try to find a coach, I think, is a really good way. If financial is not the challenge, that's what I would highly recommend doing. You need to try to recognize it. If you're stressed out, if you're working 1,000 hours a day, I shouldn't look at that as a negative, because there's a lot of people that really like to work, and it doesn't bother them to work 10, 12 hours a day. It doesn't bother them to work on vacation, doesn't bother them to work on the weekends, and that's okay. I think, but when it gets to a point where you're very agitated, you don't have time for your family, you're very short with your family, you're short with your spouse who you committed to, you told them that you loved them, you're going to be with them in richer or poor, sickness and health. If you start to get very snippety with them, which I have done, then there's a problem, right? That there's definitely a survival
Right, and
stage.
I think when your priorities get out of order, right? I understood, and well, I didn't actually. I understand now that there is going to be this give and take a little bit, but I also know that your priorities are straightened out. Where in the beginning, I would say sometimes it was hard to see, like, God first, family, then the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think very easily when you're in survival mode, it's very easy to put the business first, because how on earth can you take care of your family when the business isn't doing anything? But I would challenge you and challenge everyone, high achievers, business owners, that I think when your priorities are in order, that God kind of takes care of
Everything.
Providing in a way that's necessary. Because it's very biblical to make sure that your family is more important than the business. And I think a lot of times we excuse that by saying, I'm taking care of the family, which is why I'm gone for, 18 hours a day.
Yeah, and that could be a totally another topic, because the problem with a big problem with society today is the family nucleus and not being a priority.
Correct.
Right, and that's not going to be, not that I can say that it's never been a problem for us, but that's a top priority for you and I, to make sure that the family nucleus is a top priority, beneath our foundation in Jesus, right? And so we want to make sure that that is a priority. And it's been flipped. Like I can't lie that, I haven't put the business ahead of my wife and my daughter at times. But we always realign, we always reconnect, and we always make sure that we are prioritizing the right things. But I would agree, if your priorities start to get out of whack and out of line, it's very quickly can go downhill. So I think you've got to think about that survival stage as it's a learning experience. It's an experience that going through it, and I think everybody goes through it at least once in their entrepreneurial or, and even if you're a high achiever and you have a W-2 and you want to get to a C-level suite, everybody has that experience, that just crazy work, crazy focused on these tasks. Everybody has that experience. And I think if you're honest and you look back, it's a good experience when you look back on it. When you're in it, it's not great. It's terrible. Right? And, the work that you do, the things that you go through, the mental health, stress that you have to survive is challenging. But when you look back on it, it makes you a 10 times better person. I know tons of business owners that tried to skip it. They just tried to hire their way out of it, and their business either failed, they had to sell it, they quit, and they didn't make it through. And I'm just not that type of person. I don't want to say that I'm a quitter, but I'm not the type of person that is going to give up. I think that's a character flaw, right? Maybe that's an aggressive term.
Well, I think when you skip it too, you skip learning, like you talked about. Unfortunately, and we've talked about this in other episodes too, but unfortunately, through those hard times, through that survival, you're also doing a ton of learning. You're coachable, you're trying to figure things out, you're problem solving. So unless you go through that stage,
You won't learn it.
You're not going to learn it. You're not going to learn the business. You're not going to learn how to fix problems. So that's why I think a lot of times if you try to skip that, you end up selling, failing, like you want to get rid of it because you never actually learned the ins and outs of the business.
And I can't lie and say that I've never wanted to sell. I've wanted to sell like 100 times. Right? When you're in it, you're like, if I could just sell this would be amazing. It'd be gone. My problems would be solved. But that's not the truth. The truth is you got to wade through it. You got to work through it. And yeah, in the words of a mentor is the more doors that you go through or problems that you have, the more keys you get for that door. So now I can take this and hand it to somebody maybe I'm mentoring or somebody I'm coaching and say, listen, I've been through this 10 times. This is the key that's going to get you through that door and you'll be fine. Trust me. Just go through it. I've already failed 100 times. Let me do that failing. You just walk through it easily, right? And that's why I say I would pay somebody. Like if I knew what I know now, I would totally pay somebody to push me through. And we have
push you through, but we just said you still need to go through survival.
Push me through faster so that I could learn that. Absolutely.
Still have to go through it.
Yeah, you still need to go through it and still work through it. But if you find the right people that can help you, you can collapse that even farther. And we're doing that now. We have a couple coaches, couple consultants that we talk with on real estate side, on financial management side. Like we don't know everything. And I think that's healthy because they're going to help you not make huge mistakes that other people have probably made. So I think survival is a must. Certain levels of it, maybe you can skip if you find the right mentor and the right coach. But the best operators, and I flip this in reverse, I told you about a lot of people that quit, sold, left, whatever out of the business. But the best operators and business owners that I know today went through survival mode, survived, learned, and just became really, really great operators, right? And I don't want to stay an operator forever. I want to stay on the ground. I want to move into a coaching, mentoring, and building type of owner. But I think the best of the best in the business world are operators that have gone through survival mode and moved into those other kind of phases. So I don't know if you have anything else on that.
No. I just think wrapping up a couple things would be to recognize that you're in survival stage, right? Communicate that with your spouse, with your partner, whoever you're kind of with. Make sure that you do what you can. Use the tips and tricks. Reach out to somebody. Get a mentor. Hire the right people. Do the things that you already know to do to get yourself onto the next stage. And then as a spouse, make sure you're having grace and communicating through this survival stage together. And the time is going to be short, right? I know in that stage, we didn't have much time together, but what time you do have, make sure that you're communicating with each other, having those conversations, and again, just having grace for this stage, because it will be over eventually. Yeah,
it's just a season, right? But the question about how long it's going to be is really kind of up to you as the entrepreneur, the team that you have, and how quickly you can collapse that. I think that's the key of trying to move on from it. And to be truthful, if you haven't learned anything from that survival stage, then you're just going to stay in it. You'll never get out of it. It'll just be repeatable. So hopefully this brought some value. Hopefully this tugs at some heartstrings of some folks that are listening. Are you still in survival stage? I hope you can get out of it. Reach out to us. We're happy to talk about it. We're pretty open with our story and the stages we've gone through, the things that we've done. So reach out, send us some info, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.